Good afternoon, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nation, Assiniboine, Winniwak, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Denisovan, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. With this sentiment, I'd like to call today's Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Council, is there any changes to today's agenda? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment that council postpone item 7.2 until the next regular meeting of council, which is April the 19th.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Postpone mutual performance discussion to the next meeting. Council, any other changes? So none. Administration, any changes to the agenda?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Council? Councillor Haas?
I'd like to move that we accept the agenda, committee of the whole agenda for April 12th as amended, please.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So that brings us to citizens' minute with council. Seeing no one in the room who would wish to speak, is there anyone who would like to speak by Zoom?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to delegations and presentations. I don't believe we have any delegations presentations today.
No, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Reports from administration, 5.1 Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project. Sourth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee. So this item is one of the items that didn't quite make it through to the capital budget process for 2022 for a few different reasons. I have Mr. Van Claveren, who's the author of the report, here this evening, so I'll let him just highlight a few of the points in the report, and then we'll open it for questions from council. Mr. Van Claveren, go ahead.
Thank you, Howard, and of course through to the chair, to the rest of council. So basically what you see in the report in front of you is a situation that the capital project, which is a sustainability section of the capital project that happened in 2021, the extension of the bike park with the Trans Mountain monies. This project was in total over the amount of the 100,000 from that grant, and that was known already ahead of time. Portion of this funding was coming from the bike park community themselves through grant funding, through donations, and through the capital budget. This portion of the capital budget is utilized for the sustainability work that has to happen as soon as the project is done and basically goes over to the next year. The 2023 capital funding plan showed that it landed over there based on the ranking against the other capital projects from the town. And similar to we've seen already before, this landed in 2023 instead of 2022. Based on the conversations, of course, with the Hinton Mountain Bike Park Association and also the project lead who did the project in the initial construction, we are coming back to ask to have this fund utilized in 2022 to perform the project in this summer at an amount of $25,000 up to $25,000 coming from the reserve, which will in the long term not change the total, of course, of that reserve, but will still be funded from the restricted bike park reserve coming out in 2022 instead of in 2023. If there's any more questions, I'll be open to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Van Claveren. Ms. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other note, I believe council received a letter by email from the Hinton Mountain Bike Association in support of the recommendation that the administration has brought forward this evening. Thank you.
Ms. Howard. Council, any comments, questions, discussion? Councillor Haas.
Sorry, to clarify, and maybe I'm misreading it. I thought the Hinton Mountain Bike Association, they sent that email, but they've had some concerns with the funding. I guess just for clarification, for understanding, because as I'm reading it, there's some concerns about maintenance coming from the reserves and not being enough money in the reserve funds for 2022 maintenance. So I guess if we could clarify, I'm a little confused because I'm looking at council's number or the report's numbers, looking at there's currently $81,259 in there. We're proposing to withdraw 25,000, leaving a balance of 63,000 for 2022 and having 70,000 to a little over 70,000 in 2023. So I guess I'm concerned or just confused as to the Hinton Mountain Bike Association's concerns. Because they're speaking to, they discussed that approximately 18.5 up to 25 would be required in 2022 as follow-up maintenance. So that's how I'm reading it, unless I'm reading it wrong, but can you comment on that or clarify that for me?
You, Councillor Haas, to administration.
Thank you. Mr. Von Claveren, can you speak to that? I know you received the email as well today. If we designed this project as a 2-year project, the $100,000 was for the first year and the additional money was for the second year. We do, of course, by agreement, have contributions toward the operating budget and the capital budget. And I understand that the situation we're in here is, and perhaps this is what they're questioning, is that as we draw down our reserve to do this sustainability part of the project, it does reduce that. The other option is what they're supporting the fact that the work has to be done. I believe what they're doing is questioning where the money's coming from. So if council has another pocket of money that they would like to fund this from, either the operating budget or contingency or those sorts of things. And my apologies, administration did not provide you several options on where you could fund this from. On our report, we simply consider it being part of the capital budget. Mr. Von Claveren, if there's anything else you can add to help clarify that for Councillor Haas, that would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, and through the chair to the rest of council and Councillor Haas. So it's clear that the maintenance money that always goes to the Mountain Bike Park Association on an annual basis of $15,000 is still applicable. So that's the maintenance dollars that they have for the rest of the year, the rest of the park. This maintenance dollars you could see as maintenance because it's not construction, it's the sustainability maintenance of the first year after the new construction of the expansion is needed to be done, and Mountain Bike Association is aware and are okay that this money comes from the reserves. So the 25,000 from the reserves is meant for this, and they have still their maintenance dollars for the rest of the park for their operations of $15,000 for the rest of the year.
Okay, if I may, that's fine. I just want to more for clarification, I guess, for the HIMBA as well. But if they're clear on that, then thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm good with this $25,000 going to the club and coming from their reserve fund. My understanding is that it's to finish up with the construction of the over $100,000 that they did last year, packing, reshaping, touch up of the capital project they had from the year before, and coming from their reserve seems like an appropriate place for it to come from. I don't think this will put an undue burden on the town financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that committee direct administration to bring the Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project Report to the May 3rd, 2022 regular council meeting for decision.
Councillor Magoon, did you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, I think in our correspondence with HIMBA, I appreciate the clarification from administration. I think for the most part, it seems like everybody's on the same page. And that gives us the better part of a month to touch base with HIMBA if there's any other clarification that needs to happen before this comes before council. Thank you.
Councilor Magoon. Before we call the question, I do have a question. Is there a reason that it's coming back to the May 3rd regular meeting of council? I would have thought that if a decision earlier would give them an opportunity to be able to move forward in the knowledge that that money's available for them. Is there a reason that it can't come earlier, like to next week's meeting, to administration?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through the committee. No, other than flipping the report around in basically one day, because your agenda is coming out on Thursday. So that gives us tomorrow. Now, depending on how much this was going to change or where else maybe you wanted us to explore and get information from, if it's coming forward with the intent that it's written exactly the way it is and you don't need any more information, we could quite likely get this turned around tomorrow and on your agenda in the next day. That's the only reason it goes to your next regular meeting is not till May 3rd. And that meets our reporting timelines that we have, which is usually a 2-week turnaround, if not longer.
Okay, thank you. Council? Councilor LaBerge?
Well, I think they would appreciate the earlier date. So I don't know, would you take a friendly amendment to move it to the next meeting? Do we need to expand this report? Do we?
Sorry, may I, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think under normal circumstances, I would. In this instance, knowing that we're coming up on a long weekend,
Okay,
fair. And then, I mean, so looking into next week, you know, that's, again, it potentially is a short week. And then we're already looking at May 3rd. I think in this instance, I would rather just leave it to May 3rd. Normally, however, I would consider it.
Thank you, Councilor Lagoon. Good, Councilor LaBerge?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Thompson?
Also, I'd like to remind council that the April 19th meeting is pretty large now with your audit. You're going into closed and your audit, and there's quite a few things on that agenda to deal with. So, and I agree with the long weekend coming up. That's probably not going to work. Well, it will if we have to, if council so desires.
Council? Ms. Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to give committee some reassurance, we do have confirmation from the contractor, Hoots Incorporated, that they can't do the work until after the spring kind of wet air time anyway. And so May is certainly suffice for the group and the contractor who would be doing the work, not until summer anyway.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, council, is there anything further before we call the proposed motion to question? All right. See nothing from council. Can you see the motion? Councilor Magoon has moved that committee direct administration to bring the Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project Report to the May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting for decision. Council, last comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That was carried unanimously. Great. Is there anything further on the Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project before we move on? All right, that brings us to Cemetery Columbarium Capital Project. Ms. Howarth.
Thank you. So this item, again, is a little bit unexpected. We did anticipate needing a columbarium for 2022, knowing that the number of our niches were quickly selling out. Again, once it was vet through our capital process, we ended up having to bump it out to the year 2023. I would, if I may, invite Mr. Von Clobber to speak. He is the author of the report, just to highlight a couple of the the situation that we're in, as well as the impact on service levels, and we can answer any questions from committee.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, and through the chair to the rest of council. So this capital project was written with the quotes and understanding that we would suffice with niches into 2022, most likely maybe to the end of the year. So the moment that the capital project was vetted through the system that we had established with the new budget process, it ended up in 2023. The moment that we closed into the end of the year and throughout the first months of this year, we've seen the request for niches going up. Our wait list that was established beforehand already, we had still open niches available for utilization in the current columbariums that we have, but also those have now been utilized. So the wait list that we have are waiting for the new columbarium to be established and built. We did some requoting on the process, of course, to see what we can do. And at the moment, the perpetual funding, that's basically a reserve fund for the cemetery, will be replenished enough to buy one columbarium. That one columbarium can be sourced out to be realized this year. But it means that instead of in, again, 2023, the reserve will be utilized in 2022 to establish this one columbarium. The site will be spruced up as well in the sense of make room for it. It means establishing a concrete base where the columbarium is going to be installed upon. We can also prep the space for the 6th columbarium that will be needed basically in the, let's say, near future. In a couple of years out, we will be needing that last columbarium that complements the space over there. But in this case, there's enough in the reserve to do it in 2022 instead of 2023. So the request is to, let's say, expedite this so we can address the current request already for new niches and make sure that we have, let's say, that done for the public. Thank you, and I'll be open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Von Claveren. Ms. Howard?
Thank you. One thing I may add, I know we are proposing just to purchase one columbarium at this time, but we want to prepare a site for two to look at that whole site and that whole footprint. And the opportunity there is also working with our infrastructure services team and all of the concrete work and all of the work that they're coordinating for this season. We can just find some efficiencies and some savings there if we prepare for two sites right off the bat and landscape around that. So we're working closely with that, with our internal colleagues to find some savings for this project as well in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Council. Councilor Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, how many niches does a single columbarium support?
Councilor Good.
Thank you.
Ms. Howard?
Typically 60. Are you nodding as well, Mr. Von Claveren? I know we're looking at purchasing a slightly larger niche space because people are wanting to put a couple urns in each one, but it doesn't change significantly the overall size, and there's about 12 on each of the 5 sides.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Good. Council, Councilor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like the committee direct administration to bring the cemetery columbarium capital project report to the May 3rd, 2022 regular council meeting for decision.
Councilor Haas, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, obviously we need to, it's a service we provide and don't have the service right now. We need to replace that in order to, in addition. So I think the funds are there. So if we have to expedite it, so be it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, we have a motion before us. Council, is there any discussion? Great. No discussion. Councilor Haas has moved that committee direct administration to bring the cemetery columbarium capital project report to the May 3rd, 2022 regular council meeting for decision. Council, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Is there anything further regarding the cemetery columbarium capital project before we move on? All right, that takes us to updated Yellowhead Regional Landfill Authority agreements. Ms. Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee, and I'll apologize off the bat. Our interim CAO Hanlon was unexpectedly away this evening. So I haven't prepared the review of this report to the extent that I would otherwise. I know you've had in reports in your package for a few days, so I'll assume that you've read that through. I believe, and I can't see which staff are here on support. Ms. Davy Campbell, is Mr. Russo on this evening? He is?
Yes.
Okay, he may be able to support any questions committee may have on this matter, but what we're looking for tonight is just to accept this as an information update and direct us to bring this matter to the April 19th committee meeting for a decision. And I believe with that recommendation, ICAO Hanlon was expecting to turn this report around and get it on your very busy agenda for next week.
Thank you. Council? Comments, questions, motions? I guess I would have a question for anyone who's on the Waste Management Committee. There's discussions regarding changing the format of the operating group from the authority to, I apologize, I forget the terminology of what it was going to be changed to. Where's that in process and how would this affect it? Councillor Haas, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can, as a member of the committee. So we did go through an extensive process and decided that we were going to go to, and I wish I could remember the actual term as well, Councillor Stashik. But basically we were moving towards that it would be its own entity separate from our municipalities. Currently, right now, the CEOs got together and felt that just with the change in management, that we put that on hold for now and get some solidify some, with some management in there and get things moving again. The committee decided that within 6 months after we get a management position established, that we take a look at it again as a committee and see where we're at and work with the CEOs at the time as well. But just because of the influx right now, we felt that there's nobody really to take the reins on that at this time until management is in place. There is the possibility potentially, if the management goes well, then there may be appetite to continue with that process and not go down the route of the other, but we're going to take a look at that in 6 to 8 months afterwards. So,
Okay, thank you for that.
you're welcome.
Councillor Haas, did you want to speak to it? I saw your hand.
Well, I was just going to make the motion, but I saw Councillor Taylor with his hand up, so he made a question first before I do so. So I'll leave.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Does the changeover in management from the town of Hinton to Yellowhead County, for them looking out through the Waste Authority, does that in any way kind of affect the town's, I don't know, future rights as far as this dump or authority, this dump or waste authority goes over what they were before? In any way, or it's immaterial to that? Does that question make sense? I think because a lot of people in Hinton regard the town dump as the Hinton dump, perhaps incorrectly, but now we're going to change it from the town of Hinton managing it to the Yellowhead County under contract. So does that affect anything for the town of Hinton at all in terms of any future control we would have for the dump?
You, Councillor Taylor, to administration.
I'd like to invite Mr. Rousseau to speak to that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Howard. Through to the chair to Councillor Taylor. The short answer is that there should not be any impact to Hintonites. However, the agreement does not change, even though the operational and the administrative duties are changing as of May the 16th to Yellowhead County. If any changes do occur to the existing agreement, then of course Hinton's interests would then be looked at in a very serious manner if there's any negative impact to that. But due to the operational and the administrative duties changing as of May the 16th to Yellowhead County taking on that responsibility, there should be limited to no impact to Hinton at this point in time. When the agreement does get revisited, that is where we want to be aware of that fact that we could be impacted either way, and we want to make sure that that interest is protected.
Good, Councillor Taylor. Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if this isn't available, that's fine. I'm just curious. On page 16 of 46, one of the operating costs and implications that's identified is that because Yellowhead County takes over that administrative role, that there's no more, we're not transferred any money for taking care of our part of those duties. What's the overall, do we have an approximation of what that implication is financially?
Thank you, Councillor Magoo. Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee. I believe it's approximately $80,000 that will, that the landfill, the commission was, sorry, not the commission, the authority provided the town to manage that position, and that will now be allocated to the county.
I guess I'd like to follow up on that. Is that 80,000 then, is that directly offset by a reduction in wage or service or something where there's an actual $80,000 savings?
Thank you, Chair, through to committee. From my understanding, there is not. That was built into basically the landfill over time being worked off the side of several desks, which is why it hasn't been working as well as we all hoped. But that will be a direct loss of income, revenue, without an offset expense. So that's, I believe Mr. Rousseau and ICA O'Hanlon have had that conversation. And there'll be some sort of plan or intent to bring that to council to figure out what to do with that net deficit because of this change.
Is there anyone here that could speak to that today?
Perhaps Mr. Rousseau is the closest one. I'm not sure how robust that conversation has been had. Thanks.
Yes, through to the chair, to all of the committee. I unfortunately don't have the breakdown as to how that impact would be. I can add that it was undertaken by 3 different people in administration, myself included, Mr. Wolashin, and then of course, Mr. Kreiner himself, that came in towards the latter part of things to help us get to the stage. So CAO O'Hanlon is going to look at the impact and come back with a full report to council as to how that is going to be managed / mitigated.
Okay, thank you, Councillor LaBerge.
When I asked this question during the budget process, this was anticipated at budget time. There's no unanticipated shortfall here. The guy asked about the salary reductions with the loss of that revenue. And I was told it was all in the budget, so this isn't new and should have been anticipated.
Thank you,
Here's the
Councillor LaBerge.
results.
Council? Councillor Haas?
So I'd like to direct the committee that the Town of Hinton Committee of the Whole accepts this update as information and directs administration to bring these matters to the April 19th council meeting for decision.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Maybe we have a motion on the table. Any comments or discussion of the motion? Councillor Taylor?
Call me out of order if this isn't related, but should we, at the same time we make this decision, be discussing the financial implications of this decision?
I don't think that's out of order, but it's beyond my responding to. Administration, any thoughts on that?
My apologies, I don't have anything more than I can, than what we've already provided for myself and Mr. Rousseau, perhaps in turn, CAO Hanlon will be able to speak to that next week.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Taylor, if you had any particular concerns or comments or questions that you wanted to work through first, you could always move to table the motion until later in the meeting if you had something you wanted to discuss that might influence the decision.
Yeah, well, I was just think that if you make a decision that has financial implications, I'd like to hear about the financial implications, at least at the same time I'm going to hear about the decision I'm going to make. That's all. So if administration can bring back that information when we make this decision, whatever the date was, April 19th, that would be super.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Ms. Howard?
Mr. Chair. Again, I'm not quite sure who's on this evening. Ruth Bowden, she's on? Okay. Take a risk, put her on the spot. She may know the answer to the budget question that Councillor Barish asked. Ms. Bowden, do you know where the offsets, when we replied to the question during the budget process, how this loss in revenue to pay for the service that we provided to the landfill, when that was being offset? Do you happen to know where or how that was being done by chance? If you don't, that's fine. I realize I'm putting you on the spot here. I just thought maybe if you happen to have the answer, we could support council tonight.
You're muted, Ms. Bowden.
Can you hear me now?
There we go, yep.
Okay, so I'm not aware of there being any changes made during the budget process. I do know that we were concerned that we were looking at between $75,000 and $80,000 dropping out of the budget. But I am not aware that we had made any adjustments for that. So I will definitely make sure that information is available to council as soon as I get off this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor Hawes.
Well, and along those lines, I guess the question will be too, is because now that the town of Hinton is not doing the administrative stuff, we have the Yellowhead County doing it, but is there going to be a cost to the town of Hinton to contribute to that management position as an authority? I guess the question that I have, because I mean, each municipality chips in basically into the landfill and into that, and they contributed to us to provide that service, and now it's going elsewhere. So not only did we lose that revenue, but potentially we'll be paying a certain amount of dollar, but what that figure is, I do not know. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. The contribution that the town of Hinton makes to the Waste Management Authority, it's not changing any though, based on the fact that the town of Hinton is no longer providing administrative support. The contribution amount stays the same. It's consistent, is it not? To administration.
Yes,
Okay.
thanks. Thanks, Ruth. I can, with pretty good confidence, reply to that. Right. Out of our expense lines, we've had a contribution for that role. So all the municipalities contribute to it, and then the revenue stream that comes up is paid. So it wasn't sort of minus that. So if it's every community puts in 20,000, we've always put in 20,000, and then we get 80,000 to run to provide that service. We still put in 20,000 now, but now someone else is providing the service. So there should not be sort of a double whammy there, I guess is what you're saying. Loss of 80 plus another budgeted of an expense now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rousseau, I have that correct. I recognize it's your part of the budget, so you're probably more intimately aware of that, but there is an annual cost, a contribution to the landfill, correct? It remains the same?
That is correct, yes.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, administration. Committee, is there anything further? Okay. Seeing nothing from committee, we'd call the motion to question. Councillor Haas has moved that the town of Hinton Committee of the Whole accepts this update as information and directs administration to bring these matters to the April 19th council meeting for a decision. Committee comments? None. All those in favor? Opposed? I was in favor, Councillor Taylor. Okay, so that was carried unanimously. To Councillor Taylor's concern, is that something that needs to be captured by motion, that that information gets brought back? Or is that something that administration would just do?
Yeah, we can definitely make note of that between Mr. Rousseau, Ms. Bowden and myself. We can make sure that that's included in the report that comes. Again, it's a quick turnaround time, so hopefully that can be gathered tomorrow to create a little bit more clarity in the report when it comes back next week.
Councillor Taylor?
I was going to make a motion, but I didn't quite hear. Was that a commitment from administration to bring back on April 19th? The revenue and cost offset information for this $80,000?
Correct.
Ms. Howarth has acknowledged that's correct, yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Committee, is there anything further on this matter? All right, that moves us on to Wild Mountain Music Festival funding request. Ms. Howarth.
Thank you. Through to committee. So again, this report provided by ICAO Hanlon in response to the presentation received on April 5th to regular council, looking for the funds for the Wild Mountain Music Festival. It's been confirmed that there is not $5,000 in uncommitted funds available in the operating budget. The recommendation is if council would like to support that, it can come back to the April 19th meeting, and the suggestion for the for it to be funded perhaps from the council 2022 contingency. I'd like to just provide a bit of an update on the financial implications matrix, the first green one there. So while there is a $20,000 budget that you have for 2022, there is a commitment already of $12,500 that council made last year to support the Timberwolves out of the 2022 budget. So apologize there, there is not remaining funds of the full 20,000 anymore, but there's certainly enough there to provide funding to this group if you would like to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. So just before I go to committee, I just want to clarify. So the full budget would be $20,000, but there's a previous commitment of $12,500, you said?
Correct.
So that leaves a balance of $7,500.
Correct.
Okay, so this, through the conversation that we're gonna have here, just committee should keep that in mind, that there's only $7,500 in council contingency to last for the entirety of 2022. So I have Councillor Haas, Councillor LaBerge, and then Councillor Lagoon.
Yeah, I'm okay. That was my question because I recalled there being a commitment, but now it's been clarified from administration. I just couldn't recall the amount. So thank you from the tip. So appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haas, Councillor LaBerge.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I sat on the other side of this donation for a long time, and it was always part of the economic development budget. And it was just available year after year. Now, when we put through the proposal to reduce the cost of economic development, we talked about reducing economic development by 100 grand half. And now, so is it, I guess the question is, so there is no economic development. So we've wiped the full 230 that was budgeted for that department last year. There's nothing left in there. That we have no economic development money left. There's zero budgeted this year, is my question.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor LaBerge, to administration.
Thank you for that question. If I could invite Mr. Rousseau or perhaps Ms. Weber, I believe you're on as well.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Howard, through to committee. So there was a reduction in the 2022 budget for economic development already because there was a bunch of grant money that was flowing through there that wasn't included. So we do still have funds in economic development, but it's very little, only in some marketing and advertising. There was also some in other items such as some training, etc., but not to the degree that there would have been in a typical year. So the funds that you're speaking of for the festivals have not been specifically identified, nor were they before we, like when we did budget last August, September. None of the funding for the festivals was identified in the budget as that's what they were allocated for. Ms. Way and I have been managing some of the contractual agreements through economic development in terms of funding those agreements to date with a shortfall of funding out of the specific economic development budget.
Thank you, Ms. Weber.
Sure. So, I mean, what is our economic development budget? Very little means what?
Administration.
Through to Ms. Weber, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, through to committee. I am waiting for the budget to come through from our finance department with the final numbers. And then I could provide for the next meeting, I could provide an actual amount that is left over in the economic development budget, given that we have been spending funds from January to today already, but I could give council an update on what is remaining in the economic development budget.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Councilor LaBerge.
Sure.
Or no?
Yeah.
Councilor Magoo.
I'll actually go back in queue, Mr. Chair, until I finish formulating a direction.
Councilor Taylor, did you have your hand up? Yep, Councilor Taylor.
Well, it's kind of a follow-up to the economic development budget. Because I thought we were doing economic development a new way, and that was to have a pot of money that we could use for new projects that would be managed through the Economic Development HREDC committee, or perhaps through Nancy Robbins and her group. So it sounds like that pot might not exist, and that pot is being divided into sub-pot sections of marketing, advertising, and training without the benefit of the process that we thought it was going to go into. So maybe when administration comes back to us with information, they could speak to that on the size of the economic pot and how it's going to get used. That's kind of a question, I guess.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor, to administration.
Through to Ms. Weber, please.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, through to committee. Yes, Councillor Taylor, we will bring it back in terms of what's left in that budget. There was allocation for training, for advertising and promotional things. There were some very specific items specified in sponsorship and subscriptions. So we're maintaining the funding and spending those funds that were already pre-committed in that budget. So that has been allocated. In terms of providing council an idea of what's left over in the overall economic development budget, I can do that once I see the budget from our finance department. And you are correct that there was direction from council at budget time to look at providing an economic development focus in a different manner for the town of Hinton, although we were waiting for your strategic session to identify what the goals of council were for our strategic economic development direction, so that we haven't set up that contract or that process that you're speaking of formally yet at all until we get a clearer vision of what the focus is for all of council moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take a crack at this. I'd like to make the recommendation, and it's going to include all of the recommended recommendation. I'll build off of that at the end, so that the Town of Hinton Committee of the Whole accepts this update as information and directs administration to bring this matter to the April 19th council meeting for decision. But then I'm going to continue off of that, including options that consider any existing economic development budget. If you could just speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
I think I certainly heard Ms. Weber mention that this would be part of the options that would be brought forward next week. I just think it's important to capture it for the sake of anybody who's following along and where we might be looking at trying to get those funds from. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Committee, there's a motion before us. Anyone would like to speak to it? Comments, questions? Ms. Howarth, and then Mr. Taylor, Councillor Taylor.
If I could just double check with Ms. Weber as well as Ms. Bowden. I know we're still waiting to get some final numbers into our budgets for the 2022 budget. And recognizing, I just want to make sure that we can get this information tomorrow so that the report can come out for Thursday. That's the turnaround on this. So again, I believe ICA O'Hanlon was assuming he could meet the April 19th deadline if we were simply flipping the report, and council's intention was to either not donate the money or donate it from the council contingency. If we're looking for more information, particularly in the budget with these fine-tuned numbers, I just want to confirm that administration can achieve that tomorrow during the day. Ms. Weber and Ms. Bowden, if you can either or both speak to that, please.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Through to committee, I would like to call upon Ms. Bowden to identify if that is not achievable, depending on where we're at with the budget process to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, through to council. We are in the process of reviewing and verifying the document to make sure that it's set up properly so that we can get it into the system. We apologize for the delays. It's taken us a while to get the actual documents back from the contractor who was preparing them for us. So we should be able to, though, pull that information together to support Ms. Weber in her report. So to make a long story short, yes, we can certainly help with that.
Okay. Committee, is there anything further? Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I just want to say I support this. I mean, if we can find these dollars, you know, this is the danger of allocating funds from previous years to, you know, different budgets, you know, reducing it to by $12,500, leaving us with $7,500 in contingency to just starting the year. So I mean, if administration, you know, definitely can bring some other options, even if we can somehow offset the amount out of the contingency, I'd be in support of that. So I appreciate, you know, the direction and hope to see, you know, what options we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I'm going to speak to the proposed motion. Seeing how it's standing and it's going to come back to regular for actual decision, I'm supporting it for the time being, but I'm not sure I'm going to support it when it comes back to regular. The fact that there's only $7,500 remaining in council's contingency fund right now, and if the $5,000 is deducted from that to support Wild Mountain, that leaves only $2,500 left for the entire rest of 2022, which is, I'm really not comfortable with. That would be really challenging. And as far as funding it out of economic development budget, I support that in principle, but where I'm challenged is the fact that administration now has a one-day turnaround to get information back to us for next week's regular meeting of council. And even if they can get the budget numbers back to us, I don't see how they can get an analysis of the impact. Like, what is that going to mean if we spend $5,000 of, say, the marketing budget on Wild Mountain Music Festival? How's that going to impact the rest of the things that may come up through the year? That's the part that I fear is going to be missing from the report that comes to us on the 19th. And that's the part that I want to see every time I make a decision. I want to know what the far-reaching impacts are, not just the immediate solution. So that's the risk, I guess, that I have in having it come back to next week's meeting, if I'm not comfortable that I understand what the far-reaching impacts are going to be, I might not be able to support it. So if there's an appetite to delay it, to allow administration some additional time to get a more robust report brought back to council without it affecting Wild Mountain and their planning too much, I would much prefer that. I'd rather it come back to a regular meeting in May for decision. Thank you. Committee, anything further? Councillor Taylor?
Can Councillor McGowan repeat what he said? I can't see it on the screen. It's probably sufficient that you repeat it. That's good enough for me, please.
Sure.
May I
Councillor McGowan?
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, so it includes all of the recommendation so that the Town of Hinton Committee, and it goes all the way up to council meeting for decision, including options that consider any existing economic development budget.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll just a comment. I'll support that. And one of the things I always thought that was good for economic development was to have at least part of those funds used for events where people are bringing participants in from out of town and filling hotel rooms and that sort of thing. So to me, it fits perfectly in economic development. And seeing that we're spending training dollars for something when we don't have economic development staff, it seems like there might be room there. But yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Taylor. So, just sorry, 1 sec, Ms. Weber. Ms. Howarth, did I see you?
No.
No, okay. I'll go to Ms. Weber and then Councillor Haas.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Stashik and committee. Yes, I just want to clarify, we are not currently spending the training funds. I'm just identifying that that is still in the economic development budget to date. I would like to just clarify that my understanding was that council was seeking to have what was the remainder funding left in the economic development budget, which I could work with our finance team to provide for next week. But Councillor Stashik is correct that I would not be able to provide an analysis of what the impact is of spending the 5,000 for this particular festival would be on the overall endeavors of economic development moving forward. I would not be able to prepare that in one day, and would request that we maybe bring that report back in May, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I feel the same concerns as Councillor Stashik, and the fact, and just, the comment made, the statement made about training, I need to know the impact of that, because if I don't know what, if the training that potentially could come down the road could benefit our community in regards to economic development, especially if we don't have an economic development officer currently, that concerns me. And if we're going to take $5,000 and say it comes out of training, then how does that impact us? So I would look to a friendly amendment, and if it's not friendly, actually look for amendment to push it out to May 3rd, if that's a more reasonable time. I understand that we're speaking of $5,000 here, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's impacting both two budgets potentially, contingency fund, and we don't know the extent of the economic development fund. So I guess I'd look to administration, first of all, is May 3rd a more reasonable amount of time, or would you need more time to kind of look at economic development before I ask for that friendly amendment?
Thank you, Councillor Haas. To administration?
Thank you through to council or committee, sorry. Certainly May 3rd would give us, our reports are usually ready for April 22nd, which is next week. So that would give us about a week to pull the information together before we kind of vet it through our review process here. Ms. Weber, does that give you a little bit more time? I mean, I know it's, again, we losing some days here with the short weeks and some other priorities, but is May 3rd more likely to be able to give you some time to give some analysis of the information?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Howard, through to committee. Yes, May 3rd would certainly be the earliest that I would be able to provide that information in a week.
thank you. Councillor
So if
Haas.
I may, look to Councillor Magoon for a friendly amendment of pushing it to May 3rd instead of the April 19th meeting.
Councillor Magoon.
I think, Mr. Chair, I'm still thinking about it. If we could keep it just as a separate amendment, I would appreciate it. Give me some more time to think.
So I'd like to make that amendment that we amend the current motion to the date of May 3rd.
Okay, committee, so we have an amendment to the motion now, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, if I could ask a question, and really it's for anybody who was at council when Mr. Giroux was here last time. Did he indicate, I'm trying to remember, any hard deadlines that they were up against that this funding impacted?
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor LaBerge.
I actually had a conversation with him after, just on something else, and that came up, and there is not a hard. They're not up against it. July is their time, but obviously they'd like to have the money in the bank, so.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, and if I recall, it didn't have a deadline, but I mean, as soon as they can, but they realized it was a decision. So, yeah.
Councillor Ross, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I'm super happy to support that. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Committee, is there anything further on the amendment? We'll have to make a decision on the amendment first. Okay, seeing nothing, if we could see the proposed amendment, please. Was she saying she wanted to? Did Ms. Thompson want to speak?
I'm sorry, I see your camera on, but I can't tell if her hand is up or if she's waved or not.
Yeah, my camera's kind of sitting down a little bit here. So, Councillor Labarge, you put forward an amending motion, did you?
No, Councillor Haas did. He wanted to amend the date that it comes back to regular for decision.
Oh, it was Hawes. Okay. So you have to vote on the amending motion and then go back to the main motion and vote on it. So
Yeah.
really what you're voting on at the amending motion is just moving it to the May meeting. So just for process. So you'll
Correct.
need two motions.
That's correct. That's where we were going. We were going to
Yeah.
the amendment first and then back to the main motion.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so again, if we could see the proposed amendment, please. So amendments proposed by Councillor Haas to change the date to May 3rd, 2022. It's okay with you, Councillor Haas? Okay. Committee, any comments, discussion? Seeing none. So I just need to see Councillor Taylor. Thank you. Committee, all those in favor? Okay, so the amendment's carried. So now we go back to the main motion with the date change to May 3rd. Okay. So committee, is there any further discussion or comments regarding the motion?
Could you just read the motion again, please?
Yeah. So Councillor Magoon has moved that the Town of Hinton Committee of the Whole accepts this update as information and directs administration to bring this matter to the May 3rd, 2022 council meeting for a decision, including options that consider any existing economic development budget. All right, committee. Sorry, I couldn't see Councillor Taylor before. Is there any comment, question, or deliberation before we call the motion to question? Okay, seeing nothing from committee, we could see the motion again. I won't read it again since I just read it. All those in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously as well. Thank you, committee. Is there anything further regarding the Wild Mountain Music Festival funding request before we move on? All right, seeing nothing from committee, that brings us to 5.5, land acknowledgement discussion, and that's presented by Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this just kind of stems from a conversation of council after last meeting and where we're at with potentially looking at revising our current land acknowledgement discussion or land acknowledgement. I guess one of my, concerns, and I've done some professional in my work, some follow-up on, and there's been a lot of discussion on this with reconciliation and everything. And I guess one of the things that personally that I struggle with is the pronunciations of the different groups. And from my understanding that I've actually asked specifically, is that mispronouncing them can be quite disrespectful. And my concern for myself is being disrespectful. And I guess my question is and it's not that I can't learn, and because I know everybody else has, but I don't want to take the risk of that. Plus, I guess, maybe looking at potentially making more of this our own. And I took a page from our current youth council, and we did a lot of back and forth with our youth council and came up with our own version of it, and felt very, very good about it because it was included all of the members of committee of the youth council. So I guess I'm just throwing it out there for discussion as to the rest of council, where we're at, and where I believe administration, there is a report coming for us at some point, and where we're at with that. Maybe just a heads up, and have this initial conversation as council to if there's any direction that comes out of it as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to what other councillors have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, thoughts, comments, discussion on the land acknowledgement discussion item? Okay. Ms. Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee. If I may invite Ms. Heather Mark to just address the committee briefly, as she does work with our youth council, of course, and she's also our intern who's been working on both the lands acknowledgement. I know it's been an outstanding item on your council action pending list for quite a while. We do provide updates monthly on that, and it is still front of mind for us. But if I could just invite her to share a few comments that might help either stimulate the conversation or put some concerns to rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee, and also thank you to Councillor Haas for raising this item and letting administration speak to it. So for context, the original motion passed by the previous council directed administration to invite a representative from the Hinton Friendship Center to a standing committee meeting or to provide other feedback regarding the town of Hinton's land acknowledgement statement. So credit where credit is due. Thank you to the strategic services manager and the arena and park supervisor for facilitating the process of connecting with the Friendship Center. Around the same time that the new council was sworn in, we were graciously gifted with that eagle feather, as well as the blessed Treaty 6 and Métis flags that are in council chambers. During this exchange, administration had conversations regarding the land acknowledgement with the Friendship Center. So due to the hiatus of the elder panel, the pandemic, and our respect for the health of Hintonites, as well as the extensive amount of work that's undertaken in our community by the Friendship Center, administration made the choice to accommodate the reception of oral feedback on our land acknowledgement. So the only change that was identified was the addition of non-status peoples when listing the different Indigenous nations. And this addition is out of respect for any of the individuals that are not contemporarily nor historically recognized as status. And that reflects many in the community of Hinton. One of the reasons why administration has faced challenges with reaching out with community groups like the Métis Nation of Alberta is because land acknowledgements are a standard practice in organizations, and nonprofit organizations such as the one I mentioned seldom have the capacity to provide cultural labor without compensation. It's already a challenge as well to acquire a representative that could feasibly represent the diversity of Indigenous nations that have stewarded these lands. It was an explicit direction of the previous CAO that this item be ongoing and that we continuously improve our land acknowledgement statements. Those are the reasons why a formal information report has not yet come back to council. And thank you again for the chance to speak to this.
Thank you, Ms. Mark. Committee, is there any comments? action you'd like to take? Councillor Taylor?
Just a question maybe. If you're doing industrial applications on the Crown land outside of the town of Hinton, you're typically required to do Aboriginal consultations to upwards of 5 or 6 bands of people that have influence or whatnot in the lands around Hinton, depending on where they're where the disposition you're putting in is. So would those be the people potentially we would talk to too?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. I guess, is that a question for council or for committee or for administration, or would that be directed to?
I would direct it to Heather Mark.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. To administration.
Ms. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Through to Councillor Taylor. Yes, potentially the same groups of persons. The original motion was just the Friendship Center. Because we haven't garnered feedback from multiple different groups, we haven't prepared that information report yet for committee. Does that answer the question?
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe if we're not getting the feedback, maybe we just could modify this to make it a more succinct, yet perform the same service function for a land acknowledgement, and then send it out and see if there's any concerns with it that way to the broader group. Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To administration, are we waiting for the Friendship Center or our Indigenous friends to come to us and take a look at this acknowledgement? Or are we still pursuing going to them?
Administration.
Thank you, Chair, to Councillor Race. So this is still on our list. We are still initiating that. On our initial, we did reach out. We did receive an initial response that they thought this was pretty good. I mean, they didn't have a lot of changes. So we've already received that initial feedback from them. But we do recognize, and they also recognize that that's just their sort of first look at it and their opinion of it, and that they were also helping to facilitate going to other elders in the Indigenous communities to assist with that. There's been a few, again, family deaths and other commitments in the groups over the months that has sort of hindered our ability to move that forward. But we are waiting for some additional feedback from them, but we are always continuing reaching out without pressing and pressuring them. Again, we did recognize when this first came up several months ago that the process that we take to do this indicates the respect and that sort of process that we're all trying to do a little bit differently to engage them. And so it's, you know, sometimes not as simple as saying, please, you know, come to a council meeting because that's convenient for us and that's how we do things. It's the kind of relationship building and process that's conducive to engaging them in a way that makes them feel respected, and that we're demonstrating that we're, again, open to learning and changing and really, you know, doing things in a different way. So that's the effort that's been happening for the last several months. They're not waiting on us. We are continuing to work with them and reach out to them, and they are doing their best with it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I'd speak to it quickly. One of the things that had come up when we were kind of informally talking about our land acknowledgement is that some of members of council would considering that it might be a good idea for council to be more hands-on in helping to develop our our lands acknowledgement. That's something that I supported in principle when we were kind of chatting about it. And I think an end to achieve that would be for council to strike a subcommittee maybe that could work on developing a lands acknowledgement statement in working hand in hand with administration to get that done, to get something that builds off of the work that administration has done, but that council can look at and say that they had a hand in creating it, and that it's something that they support, and that council feels is a welcoming, inclusive statement, and that council is content in that opening our meetings with that statement is achieving the ends of ensuring that people are feeling welcomed at the meetings, and at the same time acknowledging that where the meeting's taking place and the traditional importance of the land and in the area where the meeting's taking place. So that is something I would like to see come out of this discussion is maybe a motion to create a subcommittee of council so that council can move forward working with administration to achieve that. Thanks. Ms. Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to committee. I would just, for some of you who may not recall, administration did bring, and sorry, I don't know the exact name, an inclusivity diversity policy to, I believe it was just the outgoing council, which I know many of you are the same members, so you may recall that. And the council at the time tabled that and suggested that the incoming council address this as part of your strategic planning exercise to determine how and where this is a priority for council. So while the lands acknowledgement is a very specific, narrow exercise and meaningful change that we wanted to demonstrate, it fits within that larger policy statement that perhaps Deputy Mayor Ostashik, you're referring to, whether it's, I realize it could just be a simple working committee to just get the lands acknowledgement, but there was a commitment and a direction that's come to your strategic planning session. So we can remind you of that, and administration can add that to the list of things that you maybe want to look at and address and set for your priorities in the next sort of 3.5 years. But and then it's in context to everything else and the other priorities that you have as well.
Thank you for that, Ms. Howarth. I do recall the inclusivity policy that you're speaking about, and I do agree with it and support that, and support having that come back during our strategic planning discussion. But to me, that's a broader, more encompassing policy that covers more than just lands acknowledgement and addressing the history of our Indigenous people. This to me is a narrower focused working committee of council to just take a look at our lands acknowledgement and what we're using and what we might want to use in the future moving forward. So I appreciate that very much, but I would still like to see some action come out of this discussion regarding moving forward with some type of a working group to achieve that end. Thanks. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would support that. I think part of it too, and I'm gonna, Ms. Mark initiated, I thought, a good exercise too with the youth council, where the members of youth council were to share some of the reasons why they love living in Hinton and things like that. And then Ms. Mark took that information and put together the land acknowledgement for the youth council. So I think a combination of the two, maybe all of council having some input, based on how they see Hinton, and then having that small subcommittee that works with Ms. Mark to then bring that together, so maybe a couple members of council and Ms. Mark, because I agree. I think this is something that is definitely about inclusivity, but something that we can focus and target within the next few weeks, if anything. I think so. I don't know, I guess logistically, is there anything that hinders us from making a motion to just throw together a subcommittee with administration to work on our land acknowledgement statement to administration?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Haas. Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing. What process-wise, what's the process that council would undertake to form a working group? I'm not sure who can speak to that.
Yes,
Ms. Howard?
I can give it a kick. I don't have it right in front of me. Some of you may. There is a, you have a bylaw that tells you how to form committees, and I think you had it just a couple weeks ago when you were talking about the Trails Committee. We had it attached to that one. Some of you might have it in your handy on your desktop as part of your meetings, or Miss A.B. Campbell, do you have it in the binder that sometimes you bring to meetings where it has typically those sorts of things? I don't know if Ms. Thompson, you know that off the top of your head as legislative, and you're familiar with council and their protocol for forming boards and committees?
Like me, is that the boards and committees bylaw, or is that
Yes.
the procedure bylaw? Boards and committees
It's the boards and
bylaw?
committee bylaw,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
If I may, if I recall, because we had this conversation on another one where we were looking at terms of reference and stuff, and I believe there is a working group part of it where we don't
There
in
is.
terms of reference or anything like that. So I don't know exact wording, but I don't have the policy right in front of me.
Councillor Taylor?
Just a suggestion. The last time we formed a working group was for the code of conduct. And that was for a working group to get something done quickly before Christmas. I don't recall if that was actually accomplished. I don't think so. So if we're going to do the same thing, then maybe an alternative to this, if council doesn't feel like every councillor has to be part of this, would be that this could be done through SEAC. And they're a group that might be able to give some good input as to what could get done here, perhaps with somebody like Heather Marks' help.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm gonna go to Ms. Thompson and then Councillor Haas.
Yes, in your committee's bylaw, council may establish by resolution a working committee. And I believe that it would be, but that committee shall provide each with the terms of reference. But for this working committee, for this job, I think that would be very basic to put together terms of reference for that. Or perhaps you'd like to do a task committee, which it appears that you could also do. So if there is a committee that is perhaps related to something like this, they could do a subcommittee. I'm just not aware of all your committees.
Thank you. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, if I could just speak to, I think, and I appreciate Councillor Taylor's comment on SEAC. The only thing that I would say is I would prefer this being more of a council driven initiative, being it's a council announcement. I mean, potentially if there's feedback or, some input from SEAC, we could reach out to it. But I think to actually formulate it, I think that for me personally, I think it would be best that council be a part of that. So, and I think, again, I don't think this is a huge endeavor. I mean, this is bring together some ideas from the rest of council, and and I know from experience, Ms. Mark is extremely talented in putting those words together and work with council with that. So I think it could be achieved quite easily. So, and I like the idea of a task committee. That sounds like a good one. I don't know if it's in our policy, but I like that term. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Go to Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been said already today that council wants ownership in this. We want our words used. So I feel we need to believe in the statement that we're saying, because we're saying it 4 times a month. So I would like to really stay with the working with council and administration.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. So committee, it sounds like there's an appetite to move forward with some type of a council working group with this. So we need to, I think if that's the will of council, we need to formulate some type of a direction that we can put on the table. We can discuss that and then call it to questions so that we're able to move forward. So, not sure if anybody's prepared to do that, if anybody's got any thoughts on how to do that. I think that's one of the challenges that's facing as we do this type of activity so irregularly that we're not really sure how to strike a working group or a subcommittee. Ms. Thompson?
If I could suggest a resolution to put forward. Through the chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Basically, it would be that council agrees to establish a working committee to work towards land acknowledgement. I'm not quite sure. And direct administration to develop a terms of reference for the committee, and then a date to which you'd like those terms of reference to come forward to be approved. And those terms of reference would also outline how many committee members would be appointed to this committee, whether it be all of council or at that point in time, when it comes back to council, you could decide that. But a recommendation could be in the report for approval of the term of reference.
Great. Thank
So
you, Ms.
basically, you just have to establish the working committee at this point in time and direct administration to develop a terms of reference.
Great, thank you for that. That's great. And perhaps, in addition to what Ms. Thompson was saying, that direction could state that the draft terms of reference come back to a future committee of the whole meeting for discussion, and then council can modify that draft terms of reference to meet the ends that they're trying to achieve. Ms. Howarth?
Thank you. If I could just go through, speak through to Ms. Thompson. I know we'll get the motion, or the motion up on the table here. So this is something that they can, I know they can direct today, but I think the beginning of the motion said that council do something. So does this, I mean, we're being a committee of the whole meeting today, does this now have to, can it be basically ratified today, or does it need to now come to the next week in order for them to actually action it?
They can establish, so the motion should be to establish and direct administration to develop the terms of reference to be brought back for council approval to whatever meeting.
Right, okay, so that committee, the committee does that instead of council, because this is so the committee can establish that today?
The committee, oh, right.
That's my question.
That would have to go to a regular council meeting.
Right, so actually, what needs to come out of this meeting, that's okay, I just wanted to make sure we directed them, didn't sort of skip a step, so I realize it complicates it because now it has to come to regular, but I think, I agree with the motion, I just think it's the wrong meeting for it to be at. Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, so it would have to be that council direct administration.
Well, it would just be the committee recommend that council and it comes to next week's meeting.
Sure.
I know we're stacking on lots, but there shouldn't be any research or anything that administration would have to do with that. It's just capturing that motion and then having it added to next week's agenda, if that's okay with administration.
I would not recommend adding it to next week's agenda. I think that this potentially could, when is your next regular meeting? May?
Yeah, it's not till May 3rd.
Well, if staff feels they could get a report put together quick enough, I think it's a very basic terms of reference that's required.
No, there wouldn't be any report because that's just the direction. It's just a recommendation today that it go to regular for decision. And then when it comes to regular, that's when the direction to administration would be to develop the terms of reference to come back as in draft form to a committee of the whole meeting. So there shouldn't actually be, unless I'm mistaken, there shouldn't actually be anything that administration has to prepare for next week's meeting regarding this. It's basically just taking today's motion and putting the same thing into the agenda as a direction request. That makes sense, Ms. Howarth? Is that how
Yes,
you would see it?
if we can simply do that, then that is something we can turn around tomorrow and get into your agenda 2 days from now, is to simply bring forward your direction today and ratify it next week. And we can do that for you.
Great. So I appreciate the help from administration in helping to maybe develop something that we're able to use to bring a direction to next week's council meeting. Committee, is there anybody who's got something that they think they might want to throw out there that can capture that? Councilor Magoon?
I need to ask a question of administration because it would really depend on when administration's ready to bring back those draft terms of reference to a committee of the whole meeting. Would April the 26th be unreasonable, or should it be further out into May?
Howard,
Not
yeah.
sure. So if on April 19th, you're ratifying the direction to do that, we would definitely need more than 2 business days to do that. Because again, we'd be turning it around for your very next. So at this point, we'd be looking at assuming our workloads, we can do that. We're looking at May 10th. Otherwise, and again, I don't have Miss Way with us this evening. I could be bold enough to probably even request May 24th, but I recognize that now suddenly the quick action and the task that you wanted to start working on is now suddenly 6 weeks away to even get a terms of reference back in front of you, but that is just the case. We can try to, again, bring it to your May 10th, but the report would have to be ready and reviewed for our internal processes on 2 weeks from now, which again, May 10th always seems far away, but to get it into our process, we're looking at having the report ready to review in 2 weeks from now. So that's pretty tight for the staff.
If I may, then we could undertake a technique that we've used before where we simply say before the end of May. And then that way, if it's ready for May 10th, that's great, perfect. And if not, then it would be May 24th, I believe would be the next one.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep. Committee? Just typing away furiously. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am prepared to make a motion. It's going to be a bit of one. Jen, would you rather I email it? I can if you're ready to receive.
Okay, while they do that, committee, is there any further discussion on this matter? Comments or questions? Councilor Haas?
Yeah, I guess I just want to suggest, I don't want to suggest that administration has done anything wrong with the current one that we have. I think we've just had some time to, use it, mull it over, and got to a point where we'd like to try to, revise it to be a little bit more ownership on our part. So, I mean, by no means, in my opinion, are we chastising or it's been good for us, but I think it's time, we've had some time again to sink our teeth into it. And I think we've seen other, over time, there's been more discussion on reconciliation and seen lots of other ones that we'd like to really just kind of look at owning this a little bit more. So I just wanted to make that comment. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Councilor Haas. And then, yeah, to build on that, yeah, we have been using this one for a little bit now. We've gotten feedback, or I have at least, gotten feedback from the community, including some of our local Indigenous community members, and they've provided some productive, beneficial feedback that I think a working group would be able to benefit from some of that feedback that we've gotten from the community. Like, as I said, including some of those local Indigenous members of the community who've provided feedback on it. Yeah. Good, Councilor Magoon?
Yeah, I am,
Ready to
Mr.
go?
Chair. You betcha. Thank you for the patience.
Yeah, no problem.
I'd like to make the motion that committee recommend that council establish a working committee for the purpose of establishing a land acknowledgement statement and direct administration to establish a draft terms of reference to be brought back to a committee of the whole meeting before the end of May. So Jen, I did change one word, back to not the committee of the whole meeting. Second line, end word.
Back to a committee
Yeah.
of the whole meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Maduna, did you want to speak to it?
No, I think we've talked about it, so I'm certainly in support.
Committee, we have a proposed motion before us. Anybody would like to speak to the motion? Any comments, questions, or discussion? All right, seeing nothing from committee. Councilor Magoon has moved that committee recommend that council establish a working committee for the purpose of establishing a land acknowledgement statement and direct administration to establish a draft terms of reference to be brought back to a committee of the whole meeting before the end of May 2022. Committee, all those in favor? You're in favor, Councilor Taylor? Yep, great. Okay, so that is unanimous. Sorry, I keep asking Councilor Taylor. There's a bit of a delay between us and what you do, so. Good, thank you. Yeah, you're not next door, so. Okay, committee, anything further on lands acknowledgement discussion? Okay, we'll move on to reporting. Council reports, and I will start across the table with Councilor Haas.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things to report. One, I missed it last time, but I want to mention that our Hinton Library has been nominated for the corporate, let me get it right here, Corporate Citizen of the Year. They've been nominated for that, and it's been their work over COVID and providing services in our community to residents, both by still being able to have books, but by pickup and other services as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Unfortunately, our current manager that had a big part in that will not be attending because he's moved on to another job. But in that note, we've started the recruitment process as well, and we're starting to get some resumes in. So that's good to see. And other than I was able to attend the ASH meeting, Councilor Reese asked me to attend Sunday's meeting, so I did. It was quite a short and sweet meeting, but there's a few things going on for the community to keep a lookout for. There's some events coming forward, some musicians coming, and there's also a comedian group coming as well. And they're also working hard. They've got the projector, the rental, but they are waiting parts. This is quite an expensive endeavor for the group. We're looking at about $11,000 bill. And then they got an additional, not realizing that the new, once the new part is in and everything, there's new training that's involved in it as well. That needs a technician to come out. So there was an additional, there'll be additional, they weren't entirely sure yet. They're waiting for the invoice, but this is, yeah, they prepared for it. They have the money for it, but was an unexpected expense, that's for sure. So, but other than that, that's all I report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Ross. Councilor Magoon.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank Councilor Haas for attending ASH, and other than that, nothing to report.
Thank you, Councilor Reese. Councilor LaBerge.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor LaBerge. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, on April 19th, the library is going to have a renaming ceremony for one of their meeting rooms to commemorate Tom Peterson, a historian and keeper of our stories. So I was going to, unless we're going to be short of counselors, because Tom Peterson was a personal friend, I was going to attend that for an hour on April 19th, which is also a council meeting day. So, you know, the council takes priority if we're short of quorum, but otherwise I would attend this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Taylor. As for myself, an update from Community Futures. Last week, the Economic Developers of Alberta held their annual conference in Kananaskis. And at the conference, I'm happy to report Community Futures West Yellowhead won the Regional Collaboration and Partnerships for Medium-Sized Communities Award for their Choose West Yellowhead project called Supporting Local on the Road to Recovery. So that is a nice feather in the cap of Community Futures West Yellowhead to be recognized by the Economic Developers of Alberta in economic development. Our region, we're very, very proud of the work that our people and our board does at Community Futures. So congratulations on that, on winning that award. That's all I have to report. That brings us to Chief Administrative Officer reporting. I will turn that over to Ms. Howarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't have anything that ICAO handled and asked me to pass along. But if I could just take the floor here. Tonight is Mr. Von Claverin's last evening, last council meeting with us. His last day of work is on Thursday. So I just wanted to thank him for his almost 15 years of service to the organization and to the community. Thanks, Hans, put your camera on. As you know, I mean, both Hans and his family have done a significant amount of contribution to our community and to our organization. And so I just wanted to speak publicly to send my appreciation and thank you at your final and last council meeting. I know you will, Drayton Valley is lucky to be getting you, and you will take all the wonderful things that we do here and you've learned here to that community and spread the joy that you bring. So I just thank you for the floor and allowing me to thank Mr. Von Claveren on behalf of the organization and the staff, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. Mr. Von
Thank you for your
Claveren.
kind words.
Right. On behalf of council, Mr. Von Claveren, the community too, I'd like to thank you for all the work you've done for the community, both as a member of administration and a member of the community. You've spent a lot of time, you and your family, devoted to different nonprofits, charities, and worthwhile activities outside of the work that you do for the town. So we want to express our appreciation for that as well. Thank you, and best of luck in your future endeavors. Don't take all the secrets that you learned in Hinton though. Leave some of them here. Thank you.
Thank you, and it was a pleasure and an honor to serve the community of Hinton and the residents. So thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Okay, anything further, Ms. Howarth?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to our closed session matter, of which we have one this evening. Okay, Councillor Laberge.
I move that we go into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Laberge. We will go into closed session with a 5-minute break and reconvene at 5:45.